Okay.
Okay, so first I will start with the pictures that you have on your wall. So I see a picture with somebody with a cap, and I also see a picture of home. So if you can tell us a little bit about those two pictures, that will be great. Did you hear my question?
No, I lost the connection for a minute.
Okay. So my question was the pictures behind you on your
Yes.
wall.
Yes.
So you have picture with somebody wearing a cap, and you also have a picture of symbol Om.
Yes.
So if you can say a little bit about that.
Okay. Um, well, it's not so much this the symbol of Om. So this picture, this one here, the big one, that's
Mm.
my guru.
Okay,
His name is Lee Lozowick,
okay,
and I'll get a little closer. Let's see if I can get a little closer picture of this one. So that is a statue of Lee's guru, Yogi Ram Sarat Kumar.
okay, okay. So
And they are, and I have several pictures of my guru around the house.
okay,
It's just one of those things you do when you have a guru.
okay. So I mean, what is for you? What is the meaning of word guru, or who is a guru, or what is the role of a guru?
Um, the role of the guru is to um, bring the student um, through a transformational process. You could say to know God, to know reality, to know truth, to know oneself. And the guru is the one that takes you through that process.
Okay, okay. So you mentioned that to know who you are, to know God. So what if somebody doesn't have any desire or need to know God or to know truth? Is Guru still useful or no?
No,
Okay,
they would never. Someone who wasn't interested in that, I don't think would ever have any interest in connecting with a guru. It just wouldn't ever cross their mind.
okay. So say somebody, I mean, I'm not sure if Guru is the right word, but say somebody feels that he or she knows whatever it is, reality, God, truth, or maybe just a way to live a life free of or relatively free of suffering, mental pain, anguish, and he or she sees somebody in very deep mental suffering and sees somebody repeating same mental drama again and again and going through pain. And this person who is going through this anguish, this pain, complains of that pain, complains of that suffering, but expresses no desire to know God, truth, or doesn't even come to this person or this guru asking for help or saying that, okay, I am suffering, can you show me a way out? What you think this person who has seen that in his or her own life and in a way has found a way out of it, out of this drama, out of this constant mental agony, what you think would be appropriate response?
I think the appropriate response would be to relate to the questioner at the level that they're at.
But
So-
in the, yeah, go ahead.
So if they're looking for, you know, so many times, I mean, people would come to my guru with questions about their relationships, problems with their wife or their husband, or any life problems with children, problems with work, and he would talk to them at that level, at their level of need.
Okay.
And if people came to him with other questions about a real need for God, a real need for transformation, he would talk to them at that level.
Okay. So what if, say, I mean, I cannot ask in terms of your guru because, he is obviously not here to answer me right now.
Right.
But say like, say, imagine that you are that awakened person, you are that realized or knowledgeable spiritual person who has seen his way out of at least some human dramas, some pain, some suffering, and you see somebody else suffer, and you see somebody else suffer quite deeply and frequently over and over, but this person doesn't come to you, this person doesn't ask you any question. Would you just keep silent and let him or her go on his or her way, or would you try to interfere and suggest something?
Well, first of all, I can't answer the question based on if I was some enlightened person or some awakened person, or I can only answer that question from where I am.
Sure.
So I see suffering all the time, and sometimes I feel like I cannot do anything about it in terms of anything direct with that person unless they ask for help. And at the same time, there's a way of holding that person, if you know what I mean by holding them, by like a very expansive way of relating to them that includes all their suffering. So for me, I find it's necessary to allow other people's suffering in my world.
Okay. So if I have to translate what you said, so you are saying that, imagining that what an awakened or enlightened person would do is not necessary or may not even be useful. You or I can speak at the level that we are at. And yeah, that's correct. That's good.
Yes.
And the second thing was...
as much as I'd like to speak differently, I can only speak from what I know.
Yeah, that is, yeah, and that is perfectly good, fine. And second thing is that in place of trying to necessarily eradicate, remove, or reduce somebody's suffering, you would just look to include them. I mean, kind of like love them, kind of accept them fully, kind of make them feel welcome as they are. Yeah, you can call it giving a place in your heart, including them inside you. Is
Yeah.
that a correct interpretation?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So you mentioned the word God. So what do you mean by that word?
That's a big word. It's only 3 letters, but it's a big word.
Yeah, I mean, it's the meaning we put in any word. So,
Yeah. Um, to me, God is not. God is not some guy in the sky with a big beard. God is not um, something separate. It's also God is not also something. Um, yeah, not something separate. So I tend to relate to it as a God actually as a process, as movement,
okay,
not as a particular thing.
okay,
And that movement is all inclusive of everything,
okay,
everywhere,
okay,
all dimensions,
okay,
all realities.
okay. So how do you think God relates to me or God relates to you or with any living human?
What was the last thing you said?
So I was asking, how does God relate to you, me, or any living human? So I'm talking about you and me in general terms, in terms of like just any living human being.
I'm not quite sure of the question when you say how does God relate to us. You mean like
In a sense, like say I have a father, I have a mother, I have a
mhm,
relationship with my father, I have a relationship with my mother.
mhm,
I can say that I have a body. I can even say that I am this body.
mhm.
So this body and the one that is speaking is related in some way. Same way, my eyes, my nose, my ear. I mean, there is something that relates me to all of them. This computer is something external. Still, I'm using it. I have some relationship with it. So where does God fit into it or come into it? So who is God? What is God's relationship with who a person is or who I am or who you are?
Um, I'm still not quite sure of the question, and that's okay. Um,
We can skip over it, that's fine. I mean,
I'm just
either way
not
is fine.
I'm just not relating to that orientation to God.
Yeah, yeah. So because you mentioned the
One
word
sentence,
God,
one
so
sentence could say God doesn't enter into it at all.
okay, okay.
Um,
So like I will give you an example. So say like I have some friends who follow certain religion. So they would say that okay, God has this form or God doesn't have a form. God has this name. You pray to God by this name and God listens to you and God will do what you ask of him, at least in some cases. Then there is other case where they call it non-duality, and they say that God and you are not really different. Your own reality is not separate or different from the only reality, only thing that exists. And that reality, that absolute reality, you can call it God, you can call it any name you want, but that is the ultimate, and everything else is just temporary manifestation of that force, that power, or whatever you call it. So do you share any of these views, or?
Yeah, so I would tend to agree with the second one about
Okay.
the idea of no separation.
Okay.
God is all inclusive. God is everything. Could call it God, could call it the divine. And at the same time, there is this, and this dualistic reality that we live in, and we can't discount that. We can't. I don't think it's useful to put that divine reality, that non-separate reality, as something that is better than the dualist reality.
Okay.
And then just so then because then what happens is you say it's very easy to say nothing in life matters. The only thing that matters is this divine reality, and you end up treating people poorly, treating yourself poorly, and not really understanding yourself very well, because all you're interested in is some image, some mental image, some idea about some divine reality.
Okay.
And if it is all one, then there is no separation between this dualistic reality and what we could call the divine or non-dual reality. You can't separate the two, but often in language we do.
Okay.
They are not separable.
Okay. Okay. Let me just turn the light on. Somehow the light went off. Just a minute. Okay, so that sounds good.
So in my relationship to my guru, one of he in the very early days of his teaching, back in the mid to late 70s, he talked about, his main teaching was, just wake up. That's all there is. Just wake up. And that lasted about 6 months. Because he realized that idea, that the idea of non-duality, of just waking up, of being awake, is a very easy thing to think about, a very easy thing for the mind to grasp, and then assume that I've done it. And so for the next 30-something years, most of his teaching focused on like this reality, how we show up as human beings. And so for me, it's very, very difficult to not have that as the focus. It's how I show up in the world, rather than my focus being trying to attain some other state.
Okay. Okay. So that sounds good. So what did get you interested in spirituality or in your guru?
Well, my initial interest in spirituality came through drugs.
Wow. Yeah.
Being a teenager in the 60s, and having my fair share of psychedelics and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
My first real connection to something spiritual would be the classic book Be Here Now.
Okay.
And in that book, he talks about something better than drugs. And I went, something better than drugs? How is that possible?
Okay.
And that got my interest.
Okay.
So I read the book, and I started reading books that he had listed in the back of that book,
Okay.
and finding out about different things. And so that was back in about 73 or 74. And I met my guru completely by accident. He had a bookstore in New Jersey, and I went into the bookstore not knowing anything about it. It was just happened to be in my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw there was a stack of books that were on sale. They were discounted because they were water damaged, and that's what attracted me to them.
Okay.
So I picked one of them up, and I looked at it, and it said something that I had never read before, because I had been reading things like Alan Watts and Suzuki Roshi and Stephen Gaskin, people like that. And here's this guy, and he's saying, just wake up, just come and sit at my feet, and it will be done. And I like that. He said, forget about all these paths that take 30 and 40 years, and you have to do all these intense practices and all these pranayama practices and meditation practices. Just come and sit at my feet, and it will be done. I said, I like this. This sounds good. And then it turned out, as I looked at the book, I realized that the guy that wrote the book was in the next room. He was the guy that I met when I came in the door. And so I bought the book and made some conversation with Lee as I left. And I read the book, and I loved the book, but I knew at the time that to get involved with him meant getting involved with his community. And at that time in my life, I was not a joiner of groups. I had no interest in joining groups, but I connected so strongly to what he was saying that I ended up going back, talking to him, just started going to some of the community study groups. After a few months, I moved into one of the households. And then after a couple of years, maybe a year and a half, 2 years, the whole community, we all moved from New Jersey out here to Arizona and started our first ashram. And after about 5 years into it, I realized, hey, wait a minute. Just come and sit at my feet and it will be done. I said, it hasn't been done yet.
So that was a trap? That was something to basically get you in?
Well, no, not really. It it was his second book, which came within maybe a year or a year and a half after he had this, what he, at the time he called his enlightenment event. So he actually believed it at the time. Over the years, he came to be completely embarrassed by those early writings because they were so naive and childish. And so over time, you know, we have developed a whole lifestyle of different practices. And the understanding that this kind of process actually does take a lifetime.
So I have two related questions to what you said. So first one is related to this promise that there is something better than drugs. So that got you interested in spirituality.
Yeah.
Maybe in meditation. Did you find that promise to be true? Did you find something better than drugs?
Yes. Because at the time, you know, drugs were all about the high.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the high.
I think we lost you again.
Okay.
Okay.
Did I disappear?
Yes, you did for
Yeah.
maybe a minute.
Okay. So we were talking about drugs.
Right.
So at the time for me, it was all about the high, the experience of a completely different, you know, of a psychedelic reality,
Mm-hmm.
of a whole different way of perceiving things.
Mm-hmm.
So in the beginning, that's what I thought spirituality was about.
Okay.
It was about this kind of high. And I mean, over the years, I've had, you know, what we might call spiritual experiences that are far better than anything that I ever had that was drug produced.
Okay.
And yet to me they're not all that relevant. They were experiences that came and went. And you know, I suppose somewhere they gave me some sort of I was able to get some sort of information from them. But the experience itself comes and goes. So that is more my relationship to spiritual life now is ordinary life, not extraordinary experiences.
Okay. So thank you for that. And I have two related questions.
Sure.
So one question is, so talking about Guru. So many people talk about their experience with Guru, particularly about Ramana Maharshi and also about Papaji. And one thing they talk repeatedly, and many people talk about that, is what they call darshan.
Mm-hmm.
So what they mean by it is that it's not so much what they say, it's not so much what they teach, it's not so much what you read. They say that just being in their presence, just looking into their eyes, or just seeing how they relate, how they abide, how they sit, stand, and just their mere presence has a
Yeah.
transformation effect or transforming effect on others. Do you have any similar experience with your guru or with anybody else?
Yes. I would say I would agree with that.
Okay.
That it even though my guru gave a lot of teachings, he
Mm-hmm.
taught he taught a lot to us as a group. I mean, 3 times a week for 2 hours or more each time for over 30 years. It's a lot of words, and yet it's very clear that a lot of the words are really just um, they're like they're like honey in the trap. So they attract the mind, and they keep you in the guru's presence, which when you're connected to the guru, that's where you want to be. Now there is another aspect to that, which is when you're connected to the guru, you don't necessarily have to be in his physical presence to get that same effect. The other thing is that it's also very easy to go to a guru with that idea of, to go to a darshan or something to get a hit, which is when you go with that relationship, it's just like doing drugs. You're just going for the experience. You go and you get this hit, you get a little high, um, you get a little buzz, maybe you get a little clearer, maybe you even see God, but then you go home and it's gone. And within a week, it's most likely forgotten. So then you want to go back again and get another hit. And that kind of thing can happen for years, even decades, and yet no real progress on the path is made because it's just it's like using the guru as a drug. So there is that the presence of the guru, but the student actually has to do some work in here to make some use of that. You actually have to practice. You have to do practices to be able to make use of that presence.
Okay. So again, I have two related questions. So first one is you mentioned about different spiritual experience which are similar to or maybe deeper, better, higher than the drug experience. And I'm guessing that probably those are largely result of some kind of meditation. So I've heard people as well as gurus say, so for example, Osho would say that he is always meditating. So like somebody might sit in one room for 10 minutes, 5 minutes and meditate. and get that experience. Also is saying that I'm always meditating and everything else that is happening, that is additional, that is extra, that is in addition to the meditation that is always going on. So do you think that is a good way?
If that's a real thing, since Osho said it, let's just assume that was real for him. That's where he lived, meditating. But that's not true for me. I know that I'm not always meditating. I'm not always in that state.
Okay.
And you know, so it's easy. It's that's the thing with spiritual teachings. It's easy to hear something like that from Osho, and he says, talks about always meditating, and somebody reads that and they can easily say, oh yes, that's what's always going on for everybody. We're always already meditating, and then assume that about themselves. But what's really happening is it's just another layer of covering up suffering. It's a strategy to get around being in touch with his own suffering.
Okay.
So to me, more important than being in meditation all the time, or always meditating, no matter what's going on, is to be in touch with suffering all the time. Never be out of touch with suffering.
Okay. So you mentioned like few words. So one is suffering. Second, you mentioned is path and progress. So how do you define suffering? What do you think is suffering?
Well, there's all kinds of suffering. And, I would say there's the core suffering, which is the illusion of separation, the illusion that I am not connected with what it is that sustains reality, what it is that sustains me. You could call it God, the divine, the universe, but somehow I am not connected with all that. Or you could talk about it in terms of the illusion of there being a separate self, a separate individual. And I call that the primal cramp. And then, so that's, to me, that's at the root of it. And then all the other suffering, and then there's lots and lots of other suffering that we have as human beings, usually around some sort of loss or some sort of desire, whatever it is. And those can't be discounted just because they're not, they're not they're not the real cause of suffering. They're just, they're just self-created or whatever they are. They can't be discounted. We have to, in ourselves, and so myself and in my relating to other people, I can't tell myself or tell other people that my suffering doesn't matter, that it's not important, that I should just forget about it and think about God. I don't think that's a useful way to live a life.
And you also mentioned path and progress on path. So path usually implies some kind
What
of.
part?
You mentioned path and progress on path. So usually path
Mm-hmm.
and progress imply some kind of destination, some kind of goal. So what do you think
Mm-hmm.
is the destination of this path?
I don't think in terms of destination. I don't think in terms of goal. Um, that was something that that my guru was very strong about, particularly in the beginning days, was that there is no goal, there is no end. There's no place to get to. So all the practices that we do in our school, in our community, aren't about getting somewhere. They're not about reaching some goal. They're just a natural part of life. They're just what you do when you're involved in a spiritual life. So when I said progress, progress is a, it kind of has to be in quotation marks. The idea of progress.
Okay.
But I can think about progress. I mean, I think about progress as a certain kind of maturity. So there is, as just in ordinary life, as we grow up, hopefully we mature. Oftentimes we don't. There's a lot of 40 and 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds whose emotional life is still focused around the age of 20 or younger. The whole, if you get into psychology, the whole thing about the inner child, and there's still parts of us, emotionally, internally, that are like 2 years old. We react to things the same way at 40 or 50 or 60 that we did when we were 2. So I wouldn't call that very mature, but there is a maturing process just in ordinary life, and there is in spiritual work. There even is after the point of awakening, the point of enlightenment, realization. There's a maturity that continues to happen, and if it doesn't, I think, this is just my personal opinion, of course, but if that maturity doesn't happen, then it seems like there's probably something askew about what somebody might be calling their enlightenment or their realization.
So I have something to say about that. So,
Yeah.
And many people would say that in many aspects, actually children are better than many adults. One thing is that they do not hold grudges, complaints for a very long time. Once the moment is gone, once the time is gone, the complaint is gone, the blame is gone, the anger is gone. Whereas adult, even educated, mature adults, they can hold grudges for years, easily months. They can make plots, take revenge, fight wars, do genocide, eliminate, a particular caste, particular breed of people.
Mm-hmm.
just because something that they find very bad, offending, or something they do not agree with. Children like might be complaining about not having pizza right now or not having chocolate, and 5 minutes later there is a dog and they are just running around it playing, or there is a rainbow, they are dancing now,
Hmm.
or there is a bright sunshine and they're suddenly all happy, and they're not so much concerned about what might happen like 10 years from today. They're not so much concerned about what happened 3 years ago. So maturity, education, age, wisdom does have like great value, but all I'm saying is even children or child mentality is not really all that bad.
No, what to me, what you're talking about is innocence of childhood, and that is something that um, Western culture does not support. So we bury it, we tuck it away, because according to Western cultural standards, there's no use for it as you get older, which I totally disagree with, and I'm sure you do too. So one of the things that my guru Lee was um, really an advocate for was it was conscious parenting, and we had lots of talks about this. He actually did a whole book on conscious parenting, and a lot of it is based around raising children to keep that innocence alive and active as long as possible. And that's very important in this day and age. So for myself, with part of doing that um, for my wife and I was raising our children in community with about 30 other adults and assorted children, and homeschooling our kids, keeping them out of public school as long as possible, and bringing them up in a way that um, where we did the best. I'm not saying by any stretch of imagination that we did a perfect job, but the intention being to um, to keep that innocence alive as long as possible, which takes a lot of work on the part of adults. It's not because it's not just about letting kids have their own way. You know, there's actually discipline involved with kids. You can't just let them run wild. That's not necessarily about keeping innocence alive. But when they have to be disciplined, you know, like it's really not okay to throw food around the living room, that kind of thing. What keeps the innocence alive is how you discipline, how you are with them, where you're coming from with them, the words you say to them, the mood that you're in when you talk to them, all that whole picture. And for adults to do that, it's very difficult work. That in itself is very good sadhana.
Okay, so thank you, and I think we can end with two more questions.
Okay.
So one I would like to, so not everybody knows you, I mean as a person. So if you want to say a little bit, I mean we already heard about your guru a little bit, so that part we know. But like if you have a website or a place, or if you are open for people reaching you, or any way people can contact you, or any information you want to give about yourself is okay.
Not much to really say. I don't, I don't do any teaching myself, except what I call in-house within our community. So we have an ashram here in Arizona. There's about 80 people who live in Arizona. Right now there's only about a dozen people who live on the ashram, but there's about 80 people in our community who live here. And I do a little bit of, and we have a program called the Saturday Night Talk Series that we do in town, in Prescott. And I participate in that. I do one of it. It's usually, we do it in 10-week blocks, and we just talk about general topics, about meditation, about breath work, about kindness, generosity, and compassion, just very general things that people can connect with and find useful in their lives. But most of what I like to do, when I say in-house, it's like just, and it's not, I wouldn't even call it teaching, but it's just having conversations about the teaching within the community, keeping those kinds of things alive, which is what I like to do. There are other people in our community, a couple of people who my guru sent out to start their own communities, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody, because that's rough work, not something that I'm interested in. So I really don't, I don't do that kind of work. I was just doing this with you because I've been following your videos, and even though I criticize them a bit here and there, I like what you were doing, and then you invited me to do this, so I said, yeah, sure, let's do it. Because I like to talk about spiritual things, about practice, about sadhana, particularly about gurus, but particularly also about sadhana and practice. I like to talk about those things. So this gave me an opportunity to talk about it.
Okay, I appreciate you for your time, and I thank you for your time. So the last question was, if there is any situation or condition, any like difficult condition maybe, that you want to talk about, how you dealt with it, what your thoughts were, what your feelings were, how did your spiritual knowledge, how practice helped or changed, how you felt about it, how you thought about it. And also maybe you can talk about, so say like somebody suddenly says, oh my God, you are so wise, or you are so smart. So somebody praises you, so if your response or reaction, thought, feeling change because of what you know or what you have learned. So you can share how spirituality has changed your response in both these situations.
I would say for both ends of the spectrum that you were mentioning, I would say that the way it has helped is loosened up my self-identification with the events that happen in my life, whether they're on what we might call the negative end, traumatic circumstances, difficult circumstances, or positive things, when somebody praises me, when somebody gives me a compliment. It's like not on both sides. I find myself not taking things so personally anymore, not identifying with it. And actually, I find taking much difficult, not much more, but more difficult to be able to accept, praise or compliments without identifying with that. It's much more harder to do that than to get some distance between myself and difficult circumstances. Those I find actually a little bit easier. But the other are like, because who doesn't like compliments? Who doesn't like to be praised? It's like, it's a wonderful feeling.
So thanks a lot, Matthew. Thanks a lot for your time, and thanks a lot for chatting with me.
Yeah.
So, namaskar, and maybe we'll talk again.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.